Of all the miracles recorded in the Gospels, this is the one that sounds most like a cheap parlor trick. A tax collector comes knocking. Jesus is short on cash, so he instructs Peter to go down to the lake, cast a line, and open the mouth of the first fish he reels in. Inside, he finds a coin, the exact amount needed. Peter pays the tax, and the story abruptly ends. Matthew doesn't even bother telling us whether Peter actually caught the fish. He simply logs the instruction and moves on, treating one of the most bizarre acts Jesus ever performed as if it were hardly worth finishing. For most readers, this passage gets filed away under oddities, a clever party trick, a moment of divine convenience where the Son of God pulls pocket change out of a fish because the royal treasury was bare. Because it looks like magic, most people never stop to ask the only question that truly matters. Why like this? Jesus could have paid that tax in 100 ordinary ways. Someone in the crowd certainly had money. Judas carried the purse. Jesus could have simply commanded, "Pay it," and the money would have appeared. Instead, he orchestrates the single most elaborate, seemingly unnecessary method imaginable. A specific coin inside a specific fish, caught by a specific man using a specific hook. None of this was about convenience. It was deliberate, staged theater. Once you understand what tax this actually was, what coin was pulled from the water, and what Jesus said in the 2 sentences right before he sent Peter to the lake, this quick trick transforms into one of the most concentrated pictures of the gospel in the entire New Testament. Everything is here: who Jesus is, why he came, and what he ultimately did with a debt that was never his to pay. Let's walk through it carefully, because every single detail carries weight. We begin with the tax itself, the detail almost everyone skips past, even though it serves as the hinge for the entire event. In Matthew 17, Jesus and his disciples return to Capernaum. Officials approach Peter with a simple question. In most English Bibles, it reads, "Does your teacher pay the temple tax?" But the original Greek is far more precise. The word used is didrachmon. The 2 drachma tax, a didrachmon, was a specific coin worth 2 drachmas, representing the exact fixed amount for one particular religious obligation. This was not a Roman levy. It was not tribute owed to Caesar. And these men were not imperial agents. This was the temple tax, an annual half-shekel paid by every Jewish man toward the maintenance of the temple, the daily sacrifices, and the service of God's house. This tax had an origin story, and that origin changes everything. It goes back to Exodus 30. When Israel was counted in the census, God commanded Moses that every man 20 years or older had to give the same amount, half a shekel. The biblical text gives this payment a striking name, a ransom for his life, atonement money. In Exodus, each man gives this sum to make atonement for his soul. Rich and poor paid the exact same amount because, at the altar, every soul carries equal value. The half shekel was never merely a maintenance fee. It was a symbolic token acknowledging that a person's life was covered. A small coin standing in place of a ransom that God, in his mercy, did not demand in full. So, consider what the officials were truly asking at the door. Does your teacher pay the ransom money required for the upkeep of God's house? That is the weight of the question landing on Peter. Always quick to respond without fully thinking things through, Peter replies instantly that he does. He then walks inside the house, but before he can open his mouth, Jesus anticipates his thoughts. Jesus doesn't wait to be asked. He initiates the conversation with a question of his own. What do you think, Simon? From whom do the kings of the earth collect tolls and taxes? From their own sons or from others? It sounds like a riddle, but it isn't. It was the most obvious observation about power in the ancient world. A king funds his kingdom by taxing his subjects, conquered nations, and outsiders. The Greek word Jesus uses for others is alatrioi, stemming from allos, meaning those who belong to someone else, aliens, strangers, those outside the royal family, against alotrioi, stands another word. Huioi. Sons, the king's own children. No monarch in history taxes his own children to build his palace. A prince doesn't pay rent to live in his father's house. He isn't a subject of the kingdom, he is the heir. Peter offers the only logical answer, from others. Then Jesus lands a breathtaking point, in 4 quiet words, that most readers skate right past. Then the sons are free. Pause and sit with that sentence for a moment. It is accomplishing something massive, while barely making a sound. Whose house is the temple? God's. Whose tax is this? God's. Who is the king whose divine household is funded by this half-shekel ransom money? God himself. And who, then, is the son? The men at the door came to ask if Jesus pays the tax on his father's house. The answer, wrapped inside a lesson about earthly kings, is that they just walked up to the heir of the universe and asked him to pay rent on his own home. The son is free. He is not free because he stands arrogantly above the law, but free in the way a prince is free, because it is his father's house, and he is no stranger there. He was the only person in Israel who was never a subject. Everyone else paid the ransom token because their lives needed covering. The son's life did not. He belonged inherently. Before a single fish is caught, this miracle is already quietly proclaiming, this is not just a traveling rabbi settling his bill. This is the Son of God, establishing in private that he owes nothing to the house that belongs to him. Then comes the dramatic turn, a single moment that reveals the entire character of God. Having just proved his absolute exemption, Jesus says, however, so that we do not give offense to them, go to the lake and throw out your line. The Greek word translated as give offense comes from scandalon. Originally a scandalon was the trigger stick of a trap, the piece that snaps shut when touched. Over time, it came to mean a stumbling block, something that trips a person up and causes them to fall. Jesus is saying, I am completely free, yet I will not use my freedom in a way that causes these people to trip. I won't give them a reason to stumble or reject the truth about God over something so trivial. His freedom was absolute, making his submission entirely voluntary. He chose not to stand on his rights. After explicitly establishing that he owed nothing, he quietly laid his rights aside so as not to place an obstacle before people who could not yet comprehend who he was. His exemption was genuine. His payment was pure grace. He willingly paid a debt he proved he didn't owe, ensuring his freedom wouldn't cause someone else's spiritual downfall. Jesus tells Peter to cast a hook into the sea. Take the first fish that comes up and open its mouth. Inside, he promises, you will find a coin. The Greek text names the exact coin, a stater. A stater was a single coin worth 4 drachmas. Since the temple tax was 2 drachmas per person, 1 stater was worth precisely 2 temple taxes, not approximately, but exactly. 1 coin, perfectly sufficient for 2 men, with no change left over. Then Jesus delivers the line that completes the picture. Take it and give it to them for me and for you. For me and for you. The free son who owed nothing does not merely cover his own symbolic token. In the exact same coin, he covers Peter's debt as well. Peter was not exempt. Peter was an ordinary man of Israel, a subject whose life genuinely needed the ransom token. He owed the half-shekel that the son did not. Yet a single coin pulled from the water settles both debts simultaneously, the non-existent debt of the son and the real debt of the disciple. When read slowly, this story stops feeling strange and becomes profoundly intentional. The one who was exempt pays. He pays not only what he doesn't owe, but he covers the debt of the man standing beside him who could never have paid it on his own. A free man secures the ransom of a captive using resources only he could command. If that pattern feels familiar, it should. Just a few chapters later in Matthew's Gospel, Jesus clearly states his mission. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. The word used there is Lutron. A ransom, the price paid to free someone who cannot free themselves. It is the exact truth that the half-shekel had pointed toward for centuries. The coin in the fish's mouth was a staged mini-rehearsal of the ultimate sacrifice to come, a divine ransom paid by the free Son for those who owed a debt they could never cover. First, it was paid in silver from a fish for one disciple. Later, it was paid in blood on a cross for the entire world. Now, to be fair, a thoughtful reader might object. Aren't we reading a bit too much into a brief 4-verse story? After all, Matthew never explicitly uses the word atonement here. He doesn't mention the cross in this passage, nor does he even confirm that Peter actually went and caught the fish. The narrative simply stops with Jesus' instruction. Many scholars take a far more modest approach. Jesus needed tax money. God provided it unexpectedly. So pay what you owe and trust God to provide. That practical reading isn't wrong. It is genuinely present in the text. Trusting in divine provision, fulfilling civic obligations, and trusting God with our needs are all valid takeaways. However, look at the deliberate words Matthew chooses. He does not write a generic word for tax. He specifically writes didrachmon, linking it directly to Exodus 30 and the ransom of the soul. He does not have Jesus say, "We all have to pay our taxes." Instead, he records a distinct line between huioi, sons, and alatrioi, strangers, concluding that the sons are free. He doesn't write a coin. He specifies a stater, the exact value needed for 2 temple taxes, and records Jesus saying, "For me and for you." These details are not reader imagination. They are deliberately crafted on the page. Matthew is a master of restraint who lets details deliver the sermon. And these details preach a clear message. The son who was free paid anyway, covering someone else with the exact same coin. Finally, why a fish? Why choose the strangest imaginable delivery system for currency? Look at who was sent to retrieve it. Peter, a lifelong fisherman. This was his trade, his lake, his hook, the exact movement his hands had performed thousands of times before meeting Jesus. The provision did not arrive through some mystical, foreign ritual. It came right out of the water on a fishing line, through the very work Peter knew best. Jesus met Peter inside his ordinary routine, taking a familiar act from his old life and transforming it into an unforgettable picture of the gospel. The man who was called to become a fisher of men pulls up a single fish carrying a ransom in its mouth. And it wasn't just any fish, it was the first fish, not the 10th after a frustrating morning, but the very first one waiting on the line. The entire event was meticulously engineered. The exact fish, the exact coin, the exact amount for 2 people. A God who guides a stater into the mouth of a specific fish for a specific fisherman is not merely producing pocket change. He is writing a sentence, and he expects us to read it. Step back from the shoreline, because this is where the story shifts from ancient history to your personal life. The tax was ransom money, a coin declaring, "Your life is covered." Every person in Israel paid it, because every person needed it. This quiet miracle places you directly in Peter's shoes. You are standing at the water's edge, entirely unable to produce what you owe. Whatever the true ransom of a human soul costs, you do not possess it. It isn't a debt you can settle through moral effort, good intentions, or spiritual installments. Yet the Son who owed nothing paid it for me and for you. He was free. He could have stood on his divine exemption and left us to pay our own impossible debt. Instead, he reached into a place only he could reach and brought forth a payment that covered both himself and you in a single, perfect act. You didn't fund your standing with God, and you never could. The Son covered it completely, which means you can finally stop fishing for it. So many sincere people spend their lives at the water's edge, casting line after line, trying to haul up enough goodness religious performance, or self-discipline to pay a ransom that was settled long ago, first in silver from a fish, and ultimately in blood upon the cross. You are not asked to earn the payment. You are invited to receive the one who paid it in full on your behalf. There is also a second, quieter lesson here. Notice how the free son used his freedom. He possessed every right to refuse payment, yet he relinquished his rights to avoid tripping up those who were still blind to the truth. That is the true shape of grace when it takes root in a human heart. It stops demanding its rights. It willingly yields what it is owed, rather than cause a weaker brother or sister to stumble. The free son chose to pay what he did not owe, and he quietly asks whether those he set free will learn to live with that same generous grace. This peculiar miracle was never a magic trick. It was a rehearsal. The free son paid in full for the one who could never afford it, revealing his true mission long before he ever walked up the hill to Calvary. He owed nothing, yet he paid everything, and the coin carried your name too. If this reflection brought new depth to this story for you, share in the comments what you previously assumed the fish and the coin were all about. Don't forget to subscribe so you catch the next study, and pass this along to someone who needs to stop fishing for a ransom that has already been paid in full.